You ran off with that loser, and now you got the nerve to show your face here." Those were the first words Nora heard when she stepped out of the taxi and back onto the cracked pavement of her childhood home. 10 years had passed. 10 years since she was branded the disgrace of the family disowned for following her heart and the wrong man out of town. Her mother's voice had aged, but the venom hadn't dulled. Neighbors whispered. Doors shut faster when she passed. She wasn't welcome. But Nora wasn't here for their forgiveness. She came back with one purpose: to clean up the mess they left behind, or expose it. If you've ever been blamed for things you didn't do, or walked back into a storm stronger than when you left, like, comment, and subscribe. You won't want to miss this one. Nora Palmer was once the golden girl of their sleepy Midwestern town, top of her class, captain of the debate team, church choir soloist. But everything shattered the summer after graduation, when she fell in love with Jared, a drifter twice her age, and left town with him overnight. Her disappearance sparked scandal. Rumors ran wild. And when she returned pregnant and bruised just a year later without Jared, her family slammed the door in her face. She built a life far away, working nights, raising her daughter in silence. She never looked back. Until now. The death of her father changed everything. Not because she mourned, she didn't, but because she received a letter from the county foreclosure notices, tax evasion claims, and over $300,000 in unpaid debts, all in her father's name and now legally tied to hers. Suddenly, Nora was being pulled back into a storm she'd barely survived the first time. But as she dug into the details, she found more than financial wreckage. She uncovered lies that threatened to destroy the entire family's carefully preserved image. And this time, she wasn't going to walk away. The ghosts of Nora's past aren't just memories. They're alive, and they're hiding something. Shall I move on to part 2? Backstory and conflict development. Nora was 17 when she learned that love can both free you and ruin you. He was the first man who ever looked at her like she wasn't invisible. Jared drove a motorcycle spoke in riddles and promised the world beyond cornfields and curfews. For a girl raised in a house where silence was louder than any slap, where love was conditional and smiles were currency. You could trade them, but they didn't come cheap. Jared was lightning, and she chased him like a storm. But nobody followed her. Not her father, who slammed the door and told her she was dead to him. Not her mother, who cried for days but never picked up the phone. And certainly not her younger brother Mark, who told the whole town she ran off to be a stripper. The Palmers grieved her like she was a family embarrassment that had been surgically removed. It was just Nora and Jared. Until it wasn't. Their romance died the moment real life set in. Jared drank more than he worked. He became controlling, violent, and jealous of the daughter she carried. When he hit her while she was 6 months pregnant, Nora bled through her jeans on the bathroom floor. That night she walked out. No money, no shoes. Just her unborn child, and a scar down her left arm from a broken mirror. What followed were years of quiet war. She lived in motels, took up shifts in diners, cleaned houses by day, and folded laundry at night. She gave birth alone, cut the cord herself in a county ER. She named her daughter Ellie, short for Eleanor, like the grandmother who used to sneak her cookies and courage. Nora raised Ellie with bedtime stories about second chances and courage, but never about family. Because what was there to say? The only time she heard from her parents was when her mother sent a birthday card for Ellie's first birthday with no return address and no message beyond "God bless." Nora stared at that card for hours, wondering what it meant. Did they care, or was it just guilt? She never replied, but she watched from a distance. She knew her father was re-elected to the local school board, knew Mark got a job at the same bank where her dad once worked, knew the Palmers sponsored charity events and held barbecues and smiled in town newsletters. They'd scrubbed her out of their narrative like a stain on a white tablecloth. That was the thing about the Palmers' image, was everything, and Nora had ruined theirs. When the county letter arrived a decade later, cold legal final, Nora laughed out loud. "You owe $317,000 in estate debt." How ironic. The family that abandoned her now left her with their filth to clean up. She called the county office thinking it had to be a mistake, but it wasn't. Her name had been signed illegally onto documents years ago, forged. It meant the family used her identity to cover loans, unpaid taxes, and God knows what else. Her first reaction was rage. Her second was panic. Her third was focus. Ellie was 10 now. Nora had just enough money saved to finally enroll her in a better school. She couldn't let this debt ruin everything she'd rebuilt. So she packed their things, drove back to the town she swore she'd never see again, told Ellie it was just a short trip to take care of some paperwork. But deep down, she knew this wasn't just about money. It was about truth, and about holding every last one of them accountable. But small towns don't forget scandal. Her first night back, she was turned away at the local diner where she once waitressed. Her former best friend Amy wouldn't even make eye contact. Mark acted like he didn't know her. And when she showed up to her mother's house, suitcase in hand, all she got was a door half open and a voice full of ice. "You should have stayed gone." That's when Nora realized they weren't ashamed of what they'd done. They were scared of what she might find. The paperwork she collected from the county clerk's office was only the tip of the iceberg. Bank records, property liens, fake signatures. Some dated back years to when she was still legally a minor. And the more she dug, the more the truth bled through. This wasn't just bad money management. This was fraud. And she had proof. But confronting them wouldn't be enough. Not this time. Nora had lived too long in silence. If she wanted real justice, not just legal justice, but emotional closure, she needed to make this public. Because these people hadn't just broken her. They'd weaponized her name to protect themselves, to preserve their church-going, BBQ-hosting, clean-cut reputation. And Nora was done playing quiet. Nora digs deeper and discovers the devastating family secret that could destroy them all. Shall we continue? Nora stood in the back corner of the dusty town records office, her fingers smudged with ink and her eyes burning from hours of sifting through legal filings. Most people would have given up after the second folder, but Nora wasn't most people anymore. She wasn't the desperate girl begging for love. She was a mother, a survivor, and now on the edge of a discovery that could blow her family's legacy into ashes. It started with a bank statement from 2017. It had her name on it, Nora Palmer, but she hadn't even lived in the state then. Someone had used her social security number to co-sign a second mortgage on the family home. Then came a car loan, then a business registration for a Palmer family trust. Her signature was forged each time. Someone had impersonated her across nearly a dozen documents. And every single one traced back to one common denominator, her younger brother Mark. Mark had always been the golden child. Charismatic, charming, and every bit the son her parents prayed for. He got the scholarships, he got the family support, and apparently he also got away with financial fraud. When she confronted him, he didn't even flinch. "I did what I had to do," he said, leaning against his overpriced truck. "You left Nora. You don't get to play the victim now." His smirk was the final crack in the wall. That smirk, so confident, so dismissive, was the same one he wore when he told the town she ran off to become a stripper. He had always known how to twist a story to make himself the hero. But now Nora had the receipts. The real twist came later that week when she visited the nursing home, where her Aunt Caroline, her father's estranged sister, had spent the last 5 years. Aunt Caroline was sharp despite her age, and though the family had written her off long ago, Nora remembered how kind she'd been as a child. Caroline didn't just confirm the financial forgery. She added gasoline to the fire. With trembling hands, Caroline pulled a yellowed envelope from a Bible on her nightstand. Inside were letters written by Nora's mother, begging Caroline to take custody of Nora when she was only 15. The reason Nora had walked in on something she was never supposed to see, a secret affair. Her father and a local church deacon had been quietly blackmailing each other over hush money and under-the-table real estate dealings. One of those properties, a rundown warehouse, had mysteriously caught fire the same year Jared vanished. It had been listed under Jared's name, but funded by the Palmer Family Trust. It hit Nora like a tidal wave. They hadn't just disowned her to save face. They needed her gone. Jared wasn't just a mistake. He was a liability, a man who knew too much, and who was likely paid to disappear. Her family hadn't protected her. They had silenced her. And now they were using her name to continue their cover-up. Nora drove straight to the county legal office, armed with documentation and a fury that had simmered for a decade. The woman at the desk, a young clerk named Riley, scanned the documents and widened her eyes. "You have enough here to launch a formal fraud investigation," she whispered. "This could be criminal." "Good," Nora replied, "because they don't get to write the ending." With Riley's help, Nora contacted a local news channel known for investigative stories. She didn't hide her face. She didn't use a pseudonym. She looked into the camera steady and calm and said, "I'm Nora Palmer. I was disowned by my family 10 years ago, and they've used my name to commit financial fraud, hide illegal deals, and silence me. I'm here to tell the truth." The story aired that weekend. Small towns love gossip, but they feast on scandal. Within hours, the video hit over 100,000 views online. Former neighbors began reaching out. Old friends apologized. Even strangers offered support. But the biggest surprise came from inside her own bloodline. Her mother called, not to apologize, but to threaten. "You think you're some kind of hero?" she hissed through the phone. "You're tearing this family apart." "No," Nora replied, voice steady. "You did that a long time ago. I'm just showing people the wreckage." And then she hung up. The fallout was swift. The family's assets were frozen pending investigation. Mark was placed on administrative leave at the bank. The Palmer name, once polished and respected, became the center of town-wide whispers and judgmental glances. But for Nora, it wasn't just about vengeance. It was about reclaiming power. With Riley's encouragement and Aunt Caroline's blessing, Nora began compiling her experience into a memoir. Not just a tell-all, but a survivor's guide for women who had been erased by their own families. She titled it, "The Storm I Walked Back Into." By the time the first publishing offer came through, Ellie had been accepted into a prestigious arts program out of state. Nora held the acceptance letter like it was sacred. She'd done it. Not just for herself, but for the little girl who once cried herself to sleep in motel rooms. For the woman who cut her own umbilical cord. For every time she'd stayed silent out of fear. But the storm wasn't over yet. Because justice was still waiting. And Nora had one last card to play. When the scandal hits its peak, Nora is forced to choose between public justice or watching her family collapse from the inside. Should we continue? The letter arrived in a plain manila envelope, slid under Nora's motel room door like a warning shot. Inside was a cease and desist from the Palmer family attorney, claiming defamation, emotional distress, and damages to the family name. The language was sharp, legal, and cold, but the real message was simple. "Stop talking, or we'll destroy you." Nora stared at the document for a long time. Not in fear, in disbelief. She had exposed them. She had done it all by the book documents, interviews, evidence. And their first move wasn't to admit guilt, but to pretend she was the criminal. She should have expected this. The Palmers didn't fight fair. They never had. But what broke her wasn't the letter. It was Ellie. That night, her daughter came home from school in tears. Someone had sent the news video to the school parents' group chat. One of the kids had repeated something he overheard from his mom. "Your mom's a liar. She ruined her own family." Ellie didn't say much. She just looked at Nora with wide, questioning eyes and whispered, "Is it true, Mama? Did you ruin everything?" That question knocked the air out of her lungs. Nora had survived abuse, betrayal, and exile, but nothing prepared her for the doubt in her own child's voice. For a moment, she felt 14 again, helpless, cornered, desperate for someone to believe her. She cried that night silently into a motel pillow as Ellie slept beside her, not just out of pain, but rage. Rage at a world where truth didn't always mean victory. Rage at a family that could twist everything even now. Rage at herself for thinking that doing the right thing would finally mean peace. The next morning, Nora didn't wake up with answers, but she woke up with resolve. She dressed carefully in black slacks and a steel gray blouse. She pulled her hair back tight, Not to look pretty, but powerful. She wasn't a victim testifying anymore. She was a witness taking the stand. That afternoon, she arrived at the courthouse for a hearing on the fraud charges. She had been called as a key witness. Her evidence had triggered the investigation, but now she would have to face them. Her mother sat in the front row, pearl necklace and all clutching a handkerchief like a grieving widow. Mark sat beside her, arms crossed, eyes burning holes through Nora. But it was her father's absence that spoke loudest of all. He was dead, but his legacy was very much alive, snarling through every bitter glance in that room. As Nora took the stand, the prosecutor asked her to explain how she discovered the forgeries. She spoke clearly, calmly, her voice unwavering even as her hands trembled slightly under the table. And then came the cross-examination. The Palmer's lawyer, slick, expensive, smug, tried to tear her down. "Miss Palmer," he said, with false politeness, "isn't it true that you ran away from home voluntarily?" "Yes," she answered. "And that you were involved with a known criminal?" "I didn't know he was a criminal when I left," she replied. "And didn't you at any point use drugs or engage in sex work to support yourself?" The air went cold. For a moment, the whole courtroom seemed to stop breathing. Nora blinked. Her face flushed, but her voice didn't waver. "No, but I see now you're not here to ask about fraud. You're here to shame me back into silence." That was the moment the shift happened. She looked directly at the judge, then turned slowly and looked straight into her mother's eyes. "You turned your back on me. You forged my name. You used me to protect your reputation. And you're still doing it now. I didn't ruin this family, you did. All I did was survive it." Her words echoed through the wood-paneled room like a bell. No one clapped, no one spoke. But the silence said everything. Later that week, the story hit the local paper. Not just about the fraud charges, but about the hearing. The courtroom confrontation. Nora's courage. Support flooded in again, but this time so did the hate. Her motel door was spray-painted with "traitor." Her car tire slashed. Someone left a dead squirrel on her windshield. But Nora didn't flinch. Because beneath the fear, she felt something new: clarity. She no longer needed their approval, or even their guilt. All she needed was to finish what she started. One final blow remained. She reached out to the local news station again. Not for another sit-down interview, but for something bolder. A live segment. A town hall-style broadcast where citizens could ask her anything. She knew the risk, but she also knew the power of light. When you shine it directly into the darkest places, masks melt. And that night, they did. People called in. Some angry, some compassionate, some apologetic. But then something unexpected happened. An anonymous caller, a man with a shaky voice. "I used to work with your father," he said. "I was there when they set up the shell companies. I kept quiet, but I've got the records. I'll give them to you." Nora didn't cry on air, but her hand gripped the edge of the table so tight it turned white. The final puzzle piece. The records not just proving her innocence, but confirming years of illegal cover-ups spanning real estate, public funds, even campaign finance. The Palmers hadn't just wronged her, they had stolen from the town. And now everyone knew it. That night, Nora stood outside the burned-out shell of her childhood home. It had been condemned for years, a hollow monument to secrets and silence. She held a single match in her hand, not to set it ablaze again, but to bury it symbolically. She struck it, dropped it into the ground, and whispered goodbye. Not to the house, but to who she used to be. With the world watching and her past laid bare, Nora must choose her next move and decide who she truly wants to become. Shall we continue? The motel room felt smaller now. The news reports had cooled. The courtroom had gone quiet for the moment. The town's feverish whispers had dulled into occasional stares and tense silences when she passed by. But inside, Nora wasn't calm. She was restless in a way she couldn't name. Ellie sat on the bed, sketching a treehouse with big windows and birds circling overhead. She hummed softly, oblivious to the storm her mother had just weathered. Nora watched her for a long time, wondering what kind of life Ellie would remember. Would she remember the motels, the tears, or the fact that her mother stood up when it mattered most? Nora had fought so hard for so long. She didn't know what it meant to stop. But now that the worst was behind her, something else rose from beneath the surface. The question of what next. For the first time in years, she didn't have to run. She could choose. She drove to the edge of town the next morning to the tiny coffee shop that had once been her teenage hideout. It hadn't changed much. Same sun-faded sign, same creaky booths, same burnt espresso. But when she stepped inside, one thing had changed. Riley was waiting. The young county clerk, sharp-eyed and always 3 steps ahead, had been the first person to believe her. Really believe her. She smiled as Nora sat down. "You look lighter," Riley said. Nora let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "I feel like something broke, in a good way." Riley leaned forward. "I read the early pages of your book. That voice, it's yours, and it's strong. You're not just telling your story, Nora. You're making space for other women to tell theirs." Nora blinked back sudden tears. She hadn't let herself feel proud. Not really. There was always another battle, another fire to put out. But hearing it from someone who had no stake in her pain, just respect for her courage, it landed differently. "You could go national," Riley added. "Publishers are already calling. You could leave this town for good." "Right. Speak, heal." And Nora almost nodded. Almost said yes to the freedom she'd fought so hard for. But then she thought of something else. Something harder. A few days earlier, she had received another message, this time from an unexpected source, Amy, her former best friend, the same one who hadn't spoken to her in a decade. Amy wrote, "I believed what they said about you. I'm sorry I didn't ask for the truth. My daughter saw your interview. She said you're her hero. I just thought you should know." That single message cracked something open. Nora realized the storm she'd walked back into hadn't just been about her. It was about all the girls who grew up being told to stay silent, to be good, to not embarrass the family. It was about the shame that got passed down like an heirloom. If she left now, yes, she'd be safe. But what about the others still inside the storm? What about the girls still whispering secrets into pillows at night? That afternoon, she picked Ellie up from school and drove her to the top of a hill just outside town. From there, you could see the courthouse, the church steeple, the old, burned-out Palmer house, and beyond that, a vacant plot of land once owned by her father's real estate company, a forgotten patch of weeds and broken dreams. "I think I'm going to build something here," she said softly. Ellie looked up confused. "Like a house?" "No," Nora said, smiling. "Like a place for women, a center, a shelter, somewhere safe where people like me, like us, can land when the world throws them out." Ellie thought for a moment, then nodded. "Can it have a library?" Nora laughed. "Absolutely." That night, she wrote the final chapter of her book. Not with bitterness, but clarity. She wrote about surviving not just one betrayal, but generations of silence. She wrote about reclaiming her name, not through revenge, but through truth. And she ended it with a line that rang in her chest like a bell. "Sometimes healing doesn't mean going back to who you were. It means becoming someone no one thought you could be, including yourself." When the publisher called again, Nora answered. "I'm in," she said, "but only if we donate part of the proceeds to the center. And I want local women featured in the promotion. Real stories, real faces." They agreed. She'd write, she'd speak, but she'd stay. Because sometimes the most radical thing you can do is not run, but root. Nora takes action on her bold decision, and the ripple effects are felt far beyond the town limits, ready to continue. The ribbon-cutting ceremony took place exactly 1 year to the day after Nora's final court appearance. Where there had once been an empty field of weeds, now stood a modern sunlit building with soft blue walls, a community garden, and a sign that read, "The Storm Shelter, a place to start again." Nora stood at the front steps with Ellie by her side, flanked by women from every corner of the county, teachers, nurses, single moms, survivors. Some held signs, some just held each other. But they all stood taller because of what this place now meant: hope, dignity, a new chapter. Local media swarmed the event. The same anchors who once read the Palmer scandal with polite disapproval now praised Nora's resilience like she was the town's proudest product. But she didn't smile for the cameras. She smiled when she saw Amy, her old best friend, walk up with her daughter clutching a donation envelope. She smiled when she overheard two teenagers whisper, "That's the lady who told the truth." As for the Palmers, Mark was indicted on fraud and embezzlement charges. His bank accounts frozen. His name removed from every board and plaque around town. His smirk gone. Her mother. She moved away quietly before the eviction notices arrived. Word was she'd taken a job cleaning houses in another county, an irony so sharp, Nora almost laughed. The Palmer name, once untouchable, was now a cautionary tale. But Nora didn't gloat. She didn't have to. Justice had a longer memory than revenge ever would. The center was her victory, not just over them, but over the silence that once choked her. And every brick in its walls whispered, "You didn't break me. You built me." Nora finally lets go and delivers one final message that will stay with us long after the story ends. Shall I continue? One quiet morning before the center opened, Nora stood alone in the garden she had helped plant. The breeze was soft, carrying the scent of lavender and earth. For the first time in years, there was no noise. No lawyers, no headlines, no ghosts, just peace. She wasn't the girl who ran away anymore. She wasn't even the woman who fought tooth and nail to be heard. She was someone new, someone stronger, not because she had survived the storm, but because she had learned how to walk through it without losing herself. She had drawn a line. She had spoken truth to power. She had built something that mattered. And she had done it without permission. Her story wasn't perfect. It was painful, messy, unfinished. But it was hers. And that was enough. So if you've ever been told to stay quiet, to let it go, or to apologize for simply surviving Nora's story is proof that you don't have to. You can rewrite the ending. You can reclaim your name. If this story moved you, share it, subscribe for more, or tell us your storm. You never know who needs to hear it.